Thank you for both of you saying what I was in tears. And I want to say I was on the board of Iliff School of Theology of the University of Denver, and also a very powerful women's organization. Congressman Dole's wife came and presented, and she talked about homelessness. So I put my hand up and I said, why is it we have 60% homelessness among the Black Americans in Colorado? Why do we have 90% no jobs for Native Americans in Colorado? We are the largest population. Native Americans are the largest population in Colorado. 90% no employment for them. This is a sheer destruction of the society. 80% blacks do not have jobs. The dropout rate in Colorado itself, I'm only going to talk about my backyard, is 65% for Black American students and Hispanic students. I said, what are you doing? This is a failure of an educational system, an apartheid education system here that are going to put these children in jails and reformatory schools. And also I want to talk from a Kuwaiti standpoint, which is my homeland and India. We were colonized by the British, colonized by the British in Kuwait and India. Both my grandfathers died. My mother was put in a boarding school at the age of 2. My father, thank God, he became a self-made man, but he didn't have a father from age 6th grade, didn't graduate grade 6th grade, speaks 8 languages. So the point I'm trying to make to you is, I was thrown out of these boards because I protested the Christopher Columbus parade. And I went as the Native Americans, with the Native Americans, the only board member in the history of Iliff School of Theology who walked with the professors and students. The authorities told me, no, we do not want this representation. And finally, you have given me confirmation because I am speaking truth to power. So as a board member, they expected me as the youngest colored female. They got all of this covered, and I was giving them money. I gave the money to the students who were jailed and beaten. And I have to tell you that the city auditor, Mr. Gallagher, carried me and took me so I would not cross the line, because if I crossed the line, I would have been jailed too. He got scared because he knows that I give so much time and I'm associated with the UUs. He got scared to death. He carried me, and that's how I was not put in the paddy wagon. But after all of that, and I paid for the students, and I went to the board and I said, this money is for the students. It's not going to go for the university. I was thrown out. They said, you're behaving in an irresponsible fashion. You shouldn't have gone for this march, and you're the first board member. But the professors love me, the students love me. So what I'm saying to you is, they wanted a puppet. They want the board members to be puppet. They wanted my money, but they wanted it for their institution.
If you don't mind, I would like to address this issue in a very short manner. One thing that is very clear to me in my study of dissent voice in this country, in the West in general, it's obviously achieved nothing. It wasn't designed to achieve anything. I spoke about breaking society into margins. This operation prepared the ground for globalization, for monopoly culture, and we cannot really fight against it within the current construct of left thinking or dissent lifting or progressive thinking. What we are dealing with, and this is exactly what you describe now, is controlled opposition. And Palestine, for me, is a test case because we have the entire discourse shaped not to offend the Jewish people, in spite of the fact that what we try to oppose is the Jewish state. How funny is this? And guess what? They succeeded in not achieving a thing.
I don't understand. What is the word you said?
Controlled opposition? Controlled opposition is that the opposition is itself controlled by those whom we try to oppose. Yeah.
First, I'd just like to thank both of you. I guess the question would be, it's almost impossible for me to ask the question without contradicting what you say about demonstrations, because I don't believe that. I think the film, I don't know if you've seen it, The Power of the Powerless. It was when 8 million people stood up, parents of the children that were beaten in Europe, that led to, and it's always been demonstrations with understanding what you've said. It's people who understand that and do not get into what I think your description of the other, and how we only arrive at reconciliation when we understand at the compassionate level and the clarity you talked about, what are the roots of the problem, and we put our lives on the line non-violently, that all change has happened.
I will try to be more precise. I think that 30, 40 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, demonstration had an impact. Anti-Vietnam War demonstrations had an impact. I don't have any doubt about it. This was the way in which we protested, we delivered a message. In the last 20, 30 years ago, demonstration didn't achieve anything, because they couldn't achieve anything, because we were not allowed to explore the real problems that concerned us. Now, look how ineffective were the anti-war demonstrations in regard to a second war in Iraq. It was shocking. However, people in this country and in Britain expressed their unwillingness to go to war just 3-4 months ago, in the case of Syria and Iran. And somehow, your administration and the British government had to listen to it. But these were not demonstrations. There were no demonstrations. So there is a shift. What happened in the case of Syria? We delivered a very clear message. We said no to war. Yes. And once we said no to Jewish war, this was what basically Obama did when people wrote in your papers, they spoke about the 800-pound gorilla, they were referring to the Jewish lobby. This delivered a very clear message to the Jewish lobby that they have to stop. Because if they don't stop and it goes wrong, the Jews would face some disaster consequences in this country. Once we start to tell the truth, it doesn't matter if we do it in the phone, on the net, in a small blog, it comes out. Truth travels very, very well. All it takes is the courage to stand for the truth.
Rich, do you want to respond to that?
No, I'm fine with what Gilad said.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You know, I'm an Israeli, so you know, so I'm pretty domineering.
Rich, I wanted to make a comment to you about your talk. I found part of it discouraging. The reason I found part of it discouraging is what I heard was that the resolution, in part, depends upon self-awareness, depends upon self-examination, depends upon myths, separating myth from reality. And whether you apply that to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, or to any conflict, in fact, that's asking a lot.
Yes.
And asking a lot of individuals as well as culture.
It's asking people to be conscious.
And if you ask people to be conscious, and everybody has different awarenesses of what consciousness is, that will be hard to achieve.
Right, it is very hard to achieve, and this is why it hasn't been achieved. I mean, the history of mankind.
My question to you then is, how do you apply that in a way, taking those principles that you are enunciating, how do you apply that in some practical way to the present reality, wherever it is?
Well, that's a very good question. Look, we have to get the word out. I mean, Gilad and I, there are thousands of people who speak about the Israel-Palestine subject, but the only people I know of who speak about the root problem to any extent are standing on the stage now. Identity. We have to raise people's consciousness. The only way we can do it is get people to look. I'm asking people to read a book. Let me just tell you something. Since 2006, when this transformation took place, I have asked many people, mostly Jewish, who have views that Israel is innocent, Israel is just defending itself, the Palestinians are maniacs, the usual views that we hear. I've said, why don't you read a book? Get a book. No one has to know you're reading the book. Bring it home. You can stop reading it at any time you want. You can read it in the comfort of your house, and you don't have to believe a thing you read. But just start out reading a book. Most people will not read a book because they don't want to confront themselves. This is not about Israel-Palestine. It is about our own selves. Because if people will not wake up and look in the mirror, they are not going to see that what they are defending is not Israel. They are defending a self-image into which they have never inquired. And what they need to do is start waking up, and that's why we have to get the word out.
Have you been on stage with somebody who has self-examined themselves but have come to different conclusions than you have on the same stage about the same topic? The reason I raise that is because I frequently feel that when you have one point of view on the stage, and I'm not an expert in the Middle East issue, I would like you and somebody else who has also done self-examination, but comes to different conclusions, to be on the stage.
Okay, what I'm saying is, first of all, what I'm saying, and I'm not claiming to be anything special, but what I am saying is no different what the Buddha said, what Jesus said. If someone claims to have self-examined and reached the root of their self, and they still look at the world through the eyes of separation, and they come to the conclusion, for example, Israel's just defending itself, or Israel has a right to exist the way it is, then they haven't gone very deep in their self-examination. It's as simple as that. This is a spiritual problem. It is the most difficult problem to overcome that there is, and that's why you are right, why you are discouraged, and why you should be discouraged. But it doesn't mean that it has to be that way.
Can I add something? Because it is a very important. It is a very, very important question. Something that really concerned me when I was writing philosophy about reflection, about mirroring. The problem with mirroring is that when you look in the mirror, you see yourself. This is a big problem. So if you are a Zionist, you see a Zionist, and this is exactly the problem that you refer to. The issue is that the reflection is an endless process. It's not something that stops when you wake up and you look in the mirror. And this is something that it's a really very demanding to ask from people. And this is actually the role of us, the writers, the musicians, the painters, the poetic people, the ideologists, to do because we are engaged in self-questioning. And when we know that once we start to question ourselves, it is an endless process. I'm probably one of the most developed thinkers on identity politics, or Jewish identity politics, and I'm still digging into it every day and find more and more stuff that sometimes completely subsides everything I believe in. But this is our role, and this is something that we doesn't happen anymore in society. Why? Because of cultural industry. Our musicians are engaged in selling albums within genre, writing their own symphony, like Wagner or Bach. Bach didn't write symphony, or Mozart. There is a lot of liberation that must take place, but there is a point in what you are saying. It is not simple, and as you admitted, it's not a simple process. It's not a binary thing. You know, you look in the mirror. All right, so I'm a Zionist. It's bad. It's very complicated.
And we're going to move to this one.
Wait, Dan, I just want to, let me just add one thing. What I'm trying to say, what I tried to say in my speech, and I only, you can't say everything in 30 minutes, but the problem, if the problem is one of identity, and how we identify ourselves, I use the term presumed identity, I use the term limited identity. This is not who we really are. But if we are attached to being who we think we are, anything that threatens who we think we are is a mortal threat. I mean, when people claim sitting in their house in Denver and they think, oh my God, Hezbollah or Hamas wants to kill me, they're not in any danger. But because they are identified with who Hamas may want to kill or who, they take it personally because this is a narcissistic problem. It is a problem of the ego. And so when you even have an idea that is threatening to someone's self-image of themselves, they take it as a mortal threat. Think about the war in Iraq, 2003. The few people who stood up and said, this is wrong, we should not go to war in Iraq, they were lambasted. They were accused of being unpatriotic, anti-American, by people who were so attached to their self-images and their patriotic and American images that they were willing to send their children to Iraq to kill and be killed rather than keeping them safe at home. The self-image is more important than anything there is in the world. It is more important than the lives of everybody in the world.
Woman with the white scarf.
Okay, we're on our way out because we have another event in Boulder, so this is very timely. I want to thank you both for being here. I've read both of your books.
Hold your mic closer.
Okay, read both of your books and appreciate them both. Gilad, I bought your book almost 2 years ago in Boulder, and it's in my pile.
I'm happy to buy it back if you're not.
What I need to do is, as an American Jew, I need to highly recommend this book to any Jew who wants to understand Jewish identity. I am mystified because I began the book wanting to find out why you were being accused of being anti-Semitic. I could find nothing in the book that was anti-Semitic. Not only should every Jew who wants to understand their identity read this book, but anyone who wants to understand the mind of the American Jew from the outside, or who wants to understand AIPAC, needs to read the book. This is not to diminish your book, Rich. It is also excellent.
Tomorrow we are we are working together.
But my question, very quickly, is specifically, I won't even ask the question because I'm also accused of being a self-hating Jew. My question would have been, what can we do to overcome this or to continue to march on? But it's
very
not
simple.
a question without an answer. Really.
There is an answer. When I was accused initially, and you probably also been accused of being a self-hating Jew or whatever, my first 12, 14 years ago, I said, no, I'm a narcissist. I love myself. It is you whom I hate. which is funny, but it wasn't true. Because I don't really hate. In fact, I grew up in Israel. And there are a lot of things that I loved about it. And I may even be still nostalgic about. I realize that most of the things that I'm nostalgic about are actually Palestine. It's hummus, falafel, the sky, Fine. Fine, but we had something there. So there are a lot of things, I can find myself going to a Jewish restaurant and having chicken soup. I don't hate. And still, there is a problem. I think I came to a very similar conclusion to yourself in terms of reflection. Right. And I learned it from a great anti-Semitic misogynist German philosopher called Otto Weininger, who was major inspiration for me. Otto Weininger said, when you don't When you hate someone, it is usually because you see in that person a lot of things in yourself which you don't like. This explains why many homophobes are basically themselves homosexual. It also explains why many of the anti-Semites are actually Jewish, of Jewish origin. I learned from Otto Weininger not to criticize the Jew, but to criticize, to chase with the axe the Jew in me. This, which is exactly reflecting on your ideas, as I understand, unless you change them since you wrote the book. To reflect, to look for the Jew. I'm in a war with the Jew in me. I'm not a Jew anymore. But still, there is a lot of years. I'm selling books, you know, you have 25 for 2. If you buy 1,000, you get 1,000 free, you know. This comes maybe with the genes. I decided when they call me a self-hating Jew or whatever, I go with it. I correct them. I'm not a self-hating Jew. I'm a proud self-hating Jew. I try to understand what is it in me, because the self is the closest thing you have when you try to understand the world around you. If you try to understand humanity, it is you whom you see first thing in the morning in front of the mirror. So simple. So don't be offended by it. Go with it.
I just want to add one thing, and this may go to what you were saying. You know, I think most people are decent. And so like sometimes I tell people, look, I'm not trying to tell you not to support Israel. At least have the integrity, however, to support Israel on the basis of fact rather than myth. And that's why I tell people to read a book, because I believe that some people, if they're willing to read a book and start seeing what's really going on, they'll become outraged. I mean, I know a few Jewish people who, when they discovered somehow what Israel was really doing, they got really angry because they were lied to. They said to me, they lied to us. I've been lied to all my life, and they were very upset. Some people have been upset for years about it. I was lucky. I wasn't even upset for a second, because all of a sudden the idea came that I'd been lied to, and okay, that's the way life is. But our identity is the veil of illusion that colors the way we see the world. And so I know plenty of people who are members of AIPAC who are decent people, actually. I mean, most of my family are decent people, and they hate the Arabs. But if they would start reading a book and start opening up to what has actually happened instead of living in a world of illusion, then they will start seeing, well, maybe what I was taught in first grade and never investigated, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe it does help to read a book. And they start seeing that Palestinians are also human beings. And then things can slowly change. We're trying to make this a transformational process, not an evolutionary process, which is glacier slow. But it is an evolutionary process still.
Shift of consciousness.
Right, it has to be a shift of consciousness. I am not invited anywhere. They don't want to hear me. Gilad's invited because he's a musician and he's a provocateur. I am not invited anywhere, hardly.
I can teach you, man. We spend one day, I'll show you.
But really, none of the groups, honestly, none of the groups who fight for Palestinian rights have any interest in my point of view. They have no interest in insight.
But this is very important. This is very important. Yeah, this is very important. The fact. By the way, I'm also not invited to many Palestinian solidarity groups, because they have also to maintain a lie. This is the story. You are very dangerous. You are a truth seeker. And again, once you become true Americans, we wouldn't need Palestinian solidarity movement. By the way, the Palestinian solidarity movement is not a solidarity movement, it's a solidarity industry. It's an organization that make a lot of money, getting mainly from George Soros, who is a Jewish Zionist, that also supports J Street. and actually support on your entire progressive network in this country. You know, these people are funding NGOs, civil societies, and make sure that we going astray, that the truth is not spoken. It is so simple.
Okay, we have one on this
Yeah,
side.
we have,
She have one over there. Let's go over there and then
let me just, let me recite, there's Dorothy, and then Lee, Dean, and the gentleman back there, and then you've got some others over there too, so. Try to get to all of you. And by the way, about books, you all heard that Rich Forr's book is back here, and of course, the book is here. I was very influenced by the book, The Cleansing of Palestine. Mike. There. By Ilan Pappé, and also Norman Finkelstein's books, Is There an Image and Reality of Israel Palestine? I wonder if you could comment on that. But Dorothy is our next question.
Yeah, in terms of, it sounds, Rich, like you're thinking in terms of a one-state solution as being more practical. But my question is, in terms of really moving something forward at faster than glacial speeds, I'd like to hear from both of you in terms of a both cultural and broader economic boycott and what you think of that.
I'll answer first. You want to know what we think about the boycott? Well, I support any nonviolent movement that gets people more aware of what is really going on and that compels Israel to start treating Palestinians like human beings. That's basically what I can say. Yes, I do prefer a one-state solution, but I'm not presumptuous enough to say that has to be the way things. I would prefer it. I think it's a more evolved way of living. I think people do have the ability to get along. It's just that they have all these crazy beliefs they're brought up with. In Israel, people bring their kids, their 3- and 4-year-old kids, like in Hebron, to Palestinian schools and teach their children to throw rocks and stones and eggs at the little Palestinian kids leaving the school. I mean, these people are trained to be haters. That doesn't have to be that way. But there has to be a uprising of disgust in this country about what the United States is supporting by making all of that possible with its dollars to Israel. So.
I'll be very, very short. I hear a lot of people discussing one state, two state, one state, American, English, French, and I must admit that I've never seen a Palestinian deciding whether America should split into 2 states or 50 states or whatever. It's quite unusual. There is something a bit slightly pretentious. I'm not attacking you because I'm part of it. And we have to accept that the path to humanism is to stop interfering with other people's life. Now, another very important thing to say about the one state, and obviously I'm associated. I am for many years I support the one state. Israel is one state. Right. It is a one state. It has a natural border. It has one area, one sewage system, one electric grid, pre-dial code 972. It is just one state. Where's Palestine? Palestine is within there. I'm getting there. It's just one state that is dominated by Jewish secular racism. Now it becomes even religious as we move along. And the Palestinians are subject to this racism. So in order to address it, we have to make sure, again, that we speak about the things that really are a great concern. It is Jewish racism. Okay, very simple. Boycott. I have a lot to say about the boycott. In general, like yourself, non-violent opposition is great. Stop tomatoes. Stop weapon. Put sanctions.
Yes.
For the time, the way the BDS, the boycott movement, is operating this year, you are pretty much boycotted. Norman Finkelstein, one of the greatest intellects in this movement, is boycotted. Greta Berlin, who launched the Gaza, the Free Gaza movement, is boycotted. I don't know, but even George Galloway, who is worldwide the best English speaker on the issue, is now boycotted. I didn't hear about them boycotting many Israelis. But so far, they managed to boycott every intellectual in the movement. So we have boycott. Divestment is, nobody knows what it is. You need a dictionary. And sanctions is something that, except Kerry, nobody speaks about. Sanctions, that we will have sanctions eventually, is something that those great Soros Palestinians don't speak about. But here is my problem. I have a serious problem with academic and cultural boycott, and I get a lot of flack for it. Because I believe in freedom of speech. And ideally, we should have a Zionist here today, or two Zionists, and we can discuss. Because I believe that when we talk about things, we push the discourse forward, and we bring peace. Also, yesterday, I was in New Jersey. There was an event. I gave a talk. There were two Palestinians from Gaza. One of them was on the border for 125 days. He is a Palestinian activist, came for a tour of talks, speaking tour in America. 125 days. When is the last time you waited in the airport for 125 days? When we have 1 hour delay today, I had a shit fit. Okay, 125 days, it's beyond belief. Now, if we want to support this Palestinian young man and his freedom for speech and freedom to talk, we cannot at the same time being the boycotters of freedom of speech ourselves. We have to accept that freedom of expression is an elementary right. That's what I believe in.
Back here.
I want to thank you both for coming. I really enjoyed both your talks. And I think, Gilad, there may be a connection between Ann Arbor and freedom of speech. This is a Universalist church. We belong to the Unitarian Universalist denomination nationwide. And at our General Assembly every year, there's a group called UUJME, Unitarian Universalists for Justice in the Middle East. And they aren't allowed to bring up any issues at the General Assembly. So my wife and I attended the General Assembly 3 years ago, maybe, and the UUJME sponsors a sermon, and people can send in their sermon, and they choose the best one to have delivered, but it's not at the GA, it's in the hotel next door. So
And this is in your church.
This is our church. That's why I'm saying having you here is very significant. We talked about the Middle East in this church 10 years ago, and then somebody went and accused us of being anti-Semitic, so we were shut down for a long time. And Earl and Dan have broken significant ground last week and this week, and having people talk about the Middle East. So Thank
you. Thank you so much, because I must tell you that I had problems with the Unitarian Church in the past, in Auckland, and I think that it was in Rochester. In one of them, I came and they had to check me and to talk to me. It is pathetic. It is pathetic. The event were not cancelled, but we had to find another venue. This is what it is. It's freedom of speech. Do we endorse it and make America into what it's supposed to be, or what it was, or let it be Zionized to the core?
Lee?
First thing I'd like to do is,
I thought that there is a contrapunct, there is a duo.
first thing I'd like to do is to thank both of you for being here today. And secondly, for having the courage to examine yourself, and not only examine yourself, but to share that with everybody else that you come in contact with. I applaud that. And I agree with you wholeheartedly on this idea of freedom of speech. If we look at what humanity, every one of us in this room are descendant from two people who lived in Africa 60,000 and 200,000 years ago. There aren't any ethnic differences. We are all descendant from the same people.
Yeah.
And I also say that we need to look at what divides us and what unites us. And there's a fellow named Mark Johnson who does something, since you're a musician, maybe you've heard of him. He does a program called Playing for Change, where he looks at and he says, what divides us is politics, religion, this idea of us and them, that we're not the same. That's insane. What brings us together, he thinks, is music, and he takes this his music around the world, and in one song he has people playing from countries all around the world in the same video. And it is absolutely wonderful, and I applaud the thing. We should detest the things that divide us, i.e. religion and politics, and look deep in our souls and ask, what is it that brings us together? It's our humanity and truth, and we need to examine that. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you also for being here, both of you. Your honesty, your integrity, it means a lot to me. And your work is, I've been following it for years, and I appreciate
You're
it
the
so
one.
much. I would like you, either of you, both of you, to address, since change of this magnitude that we know we have to make in this world requires a lot of resources, could you please address what it would mean to recover our monetary systems from international Jewish and other bankers?
You can't believe how simple is the answer. You can't believe. Just say it, as you said it. Most of us are afraid to admit that a certain tribe is overwhelmingly represented in Wall Street, in companies that are called Lehman Brothers and Schmiemann Brothers and Goldman and Schmucks and Soft and Coin and Oil, Levy. No. And Milton Friedman and all your Federal Reserve. There is a problem here. There is a problem, and I talk about it in my book. There is one very important thing. As I said, as I move along, I examine things all the time. And there is one thing, two things that I have to explain to you about the method in which we are doing it, or the method in which I am doing it. I realize the J thing, is when we refer to the J word, we have to differentiate between Judaism. I don't have a problem with Judaism. In fact, the crime in Palestine was done by Marxist secular Jews, not by rabbis. Now it is changing. I don't talk about Jews. We may have some Jews here. I don't know many people that are more attuned to humanism than Rich. In fact, the greatest humanists on this planet were Jews.
Yes.
Christ, Marx, Spinoza,
Yes.
for a reason. So it's not being a Jew. I speak only about Jewishness. What is Jewishness? It is that very unique tribal supremacy ideology that is driven by chosenness. We are the chosen. So then we start to talk on all those people who are driven by chosenness. Now Zionism is indeed such a movement. It is driven by chosenness, but not only. Jews for Peace, all those people in the Palestinian Solidarity Movement who are operating within Jews-only cells are also driven by chosenness. They say, we have a special role in the movement. By the way, they have. But they shouldn't capitalize on it. Okay? So this is one thing that you have to remember. Now, the most important thing, 3 days ago, 5 days ago, when I landed in the country, I had a journalist who interviewed me like a week ago and volunteered to schlep me from, to take me from DC to Baltimore. And he wanted to ask me a question because he had an interview with Norman Finkelstein this week, and he wanted me to help him. And he asked me about because no, he's not a Jew, he's a Muslim actually. And getting into the Jew, you really need a rabbi to understand what is going on. Norman Finkelstein has this new book, and he argues, and I have respect to this guy. I don't agree with him on many issues, but he's a real scholar. This is why we have to silence him. We don't like clever people. He has a new book, and in the new book, he argues the Jews are actually drifting, the American Jews are drifting away from Zionism and support for Israel. Now, he may be correct. There are a lot of polls that suggest the complete opposite. Yeah? So it's not very interesting. And I say, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if Moshe and Chaim and Yosef and Abe support Israel or Palestine. Because Jewish power is not a democratic construct. It is a very few powerful Jews. You were involved with AIPAC and you know it. Very powerful Jews who manage to mobilize political support within the administration, within the media, within the culture, within economy. And to address your question, to sort it out is to be brave enough to stand up. Now, you said it today. Thank you. Yesterday, another guy came exactly with the same question and used exactly the same terminology. 3 days ago, it happened again. Which means that people are now starting to be brave enough to stand up and say what they think. And you know, if you would say it 10 years ago, there will be kind of a whisper in the room, no, it's over. It's over, and I really hope that those who mobilize this power, the Jewish lobby, the media, and I hope that they are attentive enough to realize that the opposition is growing. Because if they won't listen, they are doomed.
We're going to take just 3 more questions because of the lateness. Well, maybe 4. This lady here, then Joseph, Dean, and then the gentleman back there.
This is just a simple question. I appreciate both of you, really appreciate your being here, and I suppose this is to both of you, but probably most to Rich, is that as change, as we know, as we've all accepted that change really begins from within. I think so it is with a nation or a country. And so I'm wondering how many, particularly of young Israelis, are more attuned to what we've talked to here. Is it a minority? Is it becoming more of a majority? I mean, because I think as with, the acceptance of homosexuality in this country, it has grown, and it has grown primarily because young people have driven it. And so I'm wondering.
I'm not an expert. I haven't studied that particular issue. But what I can tell you is that when people start becoming aware of what's really going on, there are going to be the other people who don't want change, who like things the way they are, who like the status quo, so there will be a greater reaction. So you see in Israel, the vehemence, the hatred seems to be growing, but at the same time, I do believe that there are more and more Israelis who are refusing to serve in the IDF, who are speaking out against the policies of their country. It's hard to say, but I do think that as with the internet and with the fact that you can't hide things as easily as you once could, the world is starting to become more and more aware. So some people are going to become threatened by that. As the world becomes more aware and starts criticizing Israel more and more, people with the consciousness that Israel is a safe haven for the Jewish people, it must be protected, we need Israel, they're going to become more and more threatened. And when your identity is threatened, you will not stop at anything to protect that identity. There is nothing that is out of bounds. So so there could be a lot more violence.
I would suggest that Israel left, and it's not just us, this is something that we all agree about, is non-existent. But life is complicated. At the same time, as much as Israel is becoming more and more what we call right-wing, Israeli youngsters, and you spoke about kind of even gay liberalism in Israel, what some people in the left call homo-nationalism. It's not me, I didn't come up with this term. Kind of queers who are actually very patriotic and nationalistic. Actually, Israeli youngsters are less and less willing to die. Okay, so it's a dialectic thing. Israel is becoming more and more nationalist, however, less and less patriotic.
Dean and
That's very close to the question I was about to ask. Your preservation of my existence, which I assume is my identity initially, requires violation of my deepest moral and spiritual precepts, truths. What good is my identity?
I didn't understand the question.
Okay, the question is, if preservation of my identity, my existence, what my assumed identity, I think that's my existence, requires violation of my deepest moral and spiritual precepts. What good is that existence? What good is that identity?
What I'm saying is that before we are Jewish, Christian, Muslim, English, American, we are human beings. We are human beings, and that is our common connection. Everything else is a superimposition on that, and so, and what you're asking is if your identity includes, I guess, qualities that are not humane, what good is it? Well, it's the ego. We're talking about the ego. It's so we all have so many identities, and so the question is, do we keep inquiring within? Do we keep looking and noticing where we are stuck and where we are blocking our connection to all of humanity? I'm sure everybody probably runs into people who they have a certain idea about, an assumption about how this person is, whether they're gay, black, Puerto Rican, Chinese, whatever. Everybody has these preconceptions, and these are all ideas that are unnecessary.
I have a radical answer again.
Good.
Scrap your identity. You don't need it. Identity is nonsense. The whole idea, and that last 3 weeks ago, I gave a similar talk in Japan, and there were 5 black people, which is very unusual, but they all read my book. They all read my book because my book is about identity politics. And it is there to oppose identity politics. And when I said, they ask you to identify as black because they wanted you to segregate yourself. And they all say yes. This is the trick. Identity became a very, very, very dangerous tool that actually remove us from what we are. He is rich. I'm Gilad. Your name? Dan. Din. What is wrong with being Gilad? Why do I have to identify as a Jew, which is a metaphysical concept that is not attached to myself? This is the trick of the new left. And those of you who will come, I don't know where exactly I'm talking, in the next 2 days here in Colorado, I'm going to explain exactly how they did it with Frankfurt School, with the 68 Revolution. They were clearly, it was a clear project, an attempt to destroy the West, to destroy America, to destroy Britain, to destroy France, initially to destroy Germany, and guess what? They succeeded. But we now understand what they did, and we will resurrect ourselves.
My question is rhetorical. My question is rhetorical. Tikkun and Teshuvah are the deepest heart that I can see as a non-Jew in the Jewish faith. Teshuvah. And, okay, louder.
I don't understand what you're saying.
Teshuvah, and Tikkun. Sewing up, bringing back together, making whole. These for me are the deepest portions, for me as a non-Jew, in the Jewish religion, which I respect enormously. So my question was, if things violate those, am I still Jewish? That was another way of saying the question. And I have one thing. As a response to Dr. Hoffman's, what made this practical? How do we do this? This self-reflection is very difficult. Story, 2003, south of France. 20 Israelis, 20 Palestinians invited to come and spend time there. They spent 3 weeks. First week, considerations of self, of identity were aired by a speaker. Second week, each participant told their individual personal story of what happened to them in this conflict. Third week, they're embracing each other and return to Israel to work for peace.
I mean, I forget what I was going to say because, what was I going to say? I forget what I was going to say. I had an answer, and then what you just said made me forget what I'm getting older. So.
Okay. We've got 2 more, and then a special treat. Gilad has offered to play a little bit of saxophone for about a minute and a half.
Thank you for being an example, for telling us to speak out, to expose the myths. And some of the native elders that I know said that the Palestinians are the native peoples of that Middle Eastern region. So, can you guys be quiet over there, please?
Can you be quiet?
Thank you. It's important for us to address the truth and, as you both said, to expose these myths and the creation of the other, an enemy, and that's been done throughout history, right? So we know from recent history we've got the Lavon Affair, Operation Ajax, Operation Gladio, 9/11. These are lies that are made to create the enemy, the other, to justify agendas. So I'd like you to both address this because whoever controls the narrative will control where we're going as a species. And there's a great book that I'm just learning about the history of the formation of Israel, Against Our Better Judgment, and that's available from If Americans Knew. So that's part of getting to the root source of these so we can...
Look, what I'm saying is the root source of us against them is the idea that we are a separate self. That's what I'm saying. We are not separate. We are not, as I said earlier, we are not this, that, and the other thing. We are human beings. And the other is simply a creation of our own mind. We superimpose our images onto the other and then presume we know who the other is, when really the other is a reflection of ourselves. In one sense, you can't really know the other. But in the other sense, we are all the other. We are all the self and the other. But the idea of self and other, as soon as we take on a limited idea and presume ourselves to be who we're indoctrinated into thinking we are, that already creates a barrier. That's why I talked about how we're all comfortable with ideas and behavior that fit within the framework of our identity, but ideas and behavior that fall outside that framework are perceived as possible threats.
I understand that we have to transcend those identities, but the thing is right now we're given this huge narrative about the Islamic terrorists, the fundamentalists, so that justifies this war on terror.
That's why I keep trying to get people to study the history. I am not trying to convince people that they should be humane even. I'm just trying to get them to start looking at what is really going on as a vehicle for them to start pondering their own attitudes. If you grow up believing, and we're talking about Israel-Palestine, if you grow up believing that Israel has always been an innocent country that simply wanted to live in peace with its neighbors, and I said, look, a lot of people believe that, okay? Now, if you grow up believing that, you're going to justify anything Israel does in the name of security. That's what I did. But if you start reading about it, and you start seeing that there is some truth to the things you refuse to believe in the past, you will start, most people, not everybody, but most people will start awakening to the fact that what they were brought up to believe was a con, that they've been conned, maybe unwittingly conned by people who themselves were conned.
And can you see that we've also been conned about this idea of the war on terror, 9/11?
Yes, of course.
For sure. I gave you today a tool, a very important tool. And by the way, I'm not original. I borrowed it from François Lyotard, from a French philosopher who actually himself borrowed it from Martin Heidegger, a German philosopher. I told you, all of you, concealment. Every time they tell you X, you say X in America, and X, you ask yourself, what do they try to conceal? It is very simple. So when, for instance, this is a beautiful example, and you're going to be annoyed with me. When you hear Judith Butler and all those nice Jews, now Chomsky did it, when they tell you, "Oi, in the name of our Jewish heritage," we speak about humanism, what do they try to conceal? The fact that there is no Jewish heritage of humanism. What they should say, in spite of being a Jew, I believe in humanism. Because Judaism is tribalism. You have to learn, it is a very small trick. In the first day, it takes you 10 minutes to decode a message from the White House or from Benjamin Netanyahu, whatever. But once you get used to it, you start to understand what is happening. Most of the messages that we are subscribing to, like identity, all those it's nonsense. It's concealment. As simple as that.
Last question.
We have one more question. Yes, from this gentleman back here. And before you ask your question, I just want to thank Harvey Branscombe, who helped bring this whole program together. Harvey's up there. And I also want to thank Jason Bosch, who does an excellent job of doing
I'd like to thank you both as a Palestinian, born in Jerusalem, lived in Jerusalem, and most of my life I spent it in the diaspora, unable to return back because I happened to be not one of those privileged tribes, with all my respect to you. I go there now to visit them. 3 months ago was my last trip. At the airport, I waited for 2.5 hours to be asked 3 questions. Why I'm going, who am I visiting? When I go there to Israel, long time ago, it was in 1970, after I finished my education from Denver University, I found I'm truly in a strange land. People are not the same that I lived with. Dr. Magnus was one of our tenants in Jerusalem, and he was a biochemist Nobel Peace Prize nominee. I lived with his kids in Jerusalem. And when I go there, every time it changes. It shocked me. And I say, why I don't meet people like you? What happened to Jewish ethics? What happened to those noble Jews that I'm very proud of?
Like who?
Things change dramatically, and every time to worse. I see really different image, and I hate even to talk about it. I see different people, different mentality, different attitude. I see people who look at me as subhuman, dehumanize me, build walls, apartheid in the true sense, oppression, intimidation, despicable behavior at the checkpoint. I look at their eyes, I don't see humans.
They're chosen, they're not human.
I don't see really human, but tears in my heart, tears in my eyes. What they want, what they doing to others. And to be honest with you, I say, what is happening to the people in Israel? Why they don't see what you see? Why they don't speak up? Why not the Jewish community here welcome you before we welcome you?
Yes, exactly.
They need your voices.
That's right.
We need your voices.
Right.
I mean, I don't see any damn thing to fear, with all my respect. If I live side by you, you are human. All of us are humans. What is it in us that make you an enemy or me and myself an enemy? I never been taught that way. I went to school in Jerusalem, in Lebanon, in America. We never had this. I was looking at Walid Khaldi, he's the relative of mine. I was looking in the Palestine Institute heritage books, pictures, and I see the Jews in Tel Aviv, they go to Jaffa when they were hungry to eat. So I don't know how we can change this sick mentality, racism, that exists embodied in Israel. Believe me, every time I want to make my trip shorter and get the hell from there.
I think that this is an incredible testimony. I think that this is an incredible testimony of a person who suffer firsthand what we are not even able to pronounce, which is Jewish tribalism, racism, and chosenness. Now, and this will be the last thing that I'm saying today. Jews have a lot of tragedies. Israel is the current Jewish tragedy. Why is it a tragedy? It's tragedy in its making. Zionism, if I didn't annoy anyone, this is going to shock you now. Zionism, early Zionism, was, take a breath, a beautiful thing. Back in the late 19th century, few Jews followed rich, and they looked in the mirror, and they were devastated. They said, "Oh my God, look at us. We are not productive. We are bankers. We are running the capital. If we work, we are in academia." They realized that the Jewish society is built, every society is built like a pyramid. A lot of working class, a bit of middle class, and a few bourgeoisies. They realized that the Jewish society is the other way around. Maybe there is one guy working in a factory, all the rest were in Wall Street. These are The early Zionists, Herzl, Nordau, Jabotinsky, Borochov, Pinsker, they said, we are disgusting. The early Zionists. They were anti-Semitic to the bone. But they said, it's not our fault. It all happens because we don't have a land of our own. Now, the diagnosis was correct. The remedy was wrong. They were right, there was a problem. They spoke about the morbidity of the Jews in the diaspora. They said, we go to our promised land. And by the way, they were debating, as we all know, there was Uganda, and there was a project in Argentina, but they all wanted to go to your land, to Palestine. Yes. And they came to Palestine, and they said, we are going to work. Doctors landed in Palestine, dropped their medical career, and work as farmers. And they built factories, and they worked in the factories for almost 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, they realized, or 3 weeks, that there is some cheap labor in the region. And this was the end of the Zionist project. Oi, 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 oi. This was the end of the Zionist project. This was the end of, it took 20 years of debates. What really happened in Palestine? And this is the answer to your question. It was an anti-Jewish project. Zionism started as an anti-Jewish project, but because it was there to establish the Jewish state for the Jews, it was transformed or infiltrated with Jewish ideology. And what is their Jewish ideology? Different, we spoke about it earlier, different forms of chosenness. This is why it is actually the Jewish Marxist progressive, so-called, that cleansed you from, that kicked you out of your village or house, or city, I don't know where you're from. It was actually the good Jews, not the rabbis. Because they surrendered, in spite of Zionism, early Zionism, they surrendered to their Jewishness. And this is what you see. Israel is becoming more and more and more Jewish, and it is also our fault. Because maybe there was one person in the room who was brave enough to say the J word. Once we start to criticize them for what they are, as you said, we will actually not just save ourselves, could also save them from themselves.
I just want to add, I talked about enemy images. When people are indoctrinated into enemy images, they don't see, like you said, they dehumanize you. They do not see a human being in front of them. They see an object. If someone had told them that you were a nice Jewish man from the United States or from some other country, they would see a completely different being in front of them. It is because of these ideas, and it has to do with fear of the Holocaust, being indoctrinated into the world as being anti-Semitic. Zionism is based, Israel can't even exist without anti-Semitism. If anti-Semitism really went away, then what would happen to Israel? The Jews in the United States the young ones at least, probably wouldn't support the government of Israel, the state of Israel. So.
All right, well that is going to conclude our program, but before we listen to some wonderful saxophone music, I want to remind people that tonight at 7:30, Gilad will be playing more of his saxophone, and that's at the Phoenician Kebab at 5709 East Colfax. And then tomorrow, between 12 noon and 2 p.m. Both Rich, Ford, and Gilad will be in Boulder, at the University of Colorado in Boulder, at the UMC Memorial Center, room 425.
That is the same building as where the Alfred Packer cafeteria is housed. It's the same building.
Okay. And then tomorrow night, 7 to 9, Gilad, accompanied by Rich, but Gilad will be the official speaker at We Are Change Colorado, which is at the Colorado Community Center, and that's at 8646 West Colfax, 7 to 9 tomorrow.
I want to say one more thing about tonight. Venetian Kebab is some of the best Middle Eastern food in Denver. If you haven't been there, they're amazing. And so the music starts at 7:30. If you do want to go, I encourage you to call and make reservations so they can just plan for seating. And we do have a great band. We've got a bunch of local jazz musicians that we've got on to. They're going to be playing with Gilad. So, yeah, you guys should come out for that tonight.
In the break. I'm going to play just because I'm a saxophonist after all. That's what I'm doing for a living. And I'm going to play one tune that is very important for me. I play it a lot. It is called Wonderful World, because I believe it is a wonderful world.